The United States has sent a new peace proposal, while Iran's supreme leader warns of inflicting a bitter defeat on its opponents. Right after Russia, a group of countries announced historic measures on Cuba, leaving millions of people in Havana overwhelmed with emotion. A French soldier was killed in Lebanon, reportedly in an incident suspected to involve Hezbollah. Russia has reacted after the United States unexpectedly reversed course on oil sanctions, and Russia's foreign minister has commented on Moscow's red lines. Welcome to the YouTube channel of a Tatting newspaper. Let us take a look at today's most notable developments. On April 18th, Iran's Supreme National Security Council said it was reviewing new proposals from the United States, while also making clear that it would not compromise. In a statement, Iran's Supreme National Security Council said that in recent days, with the presence of Pakistan's army chief in Tehran acting as a mediator in the talks, the American side had submitted new proposals. Tehran is currently reviewing them and has not yet issued a response. The statement added that Iran's negotiating delegation would make no compromise, no retreat, and no concession whatsoever, not even the slightest one, and would defend the national interests with all of its strength. According to Iran's Supreme National Security Council, Tehran is determined to enforce the monitoring and control of traffic in the Strait of Hormuz. The Council noted that the reopening of the strait would involve Tehran issuing transit certificates for vessels, as well as requiring payment of fees related to security services, safety, and environmental protection. The next round of talks between the United States and Iran is reportedly expected to take place on the 20th of next month in Pakistan, but neither side has confirmed a fixed date. Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Saeed Khatibzadeh stated that Tehran would only take part in the next round of negotiations if the two sides could agree on a common framework of understanding. Mr. Khatibzadeh rejected contradictory and vague statements about the timing of the next round of talks, while also affirming that no specific date had yet been set. He added, quote, "We are focused on finalizing the framework. There has been some progress, but differences still remain. Until a framework is agreed, we cannot set a meeting date." He reaffirmed Iran's firm commitment to diplomacy even under these sensitive conditions, while urging the United States to abandon its approach of maximizing demands. Mr. Khatibzadeh pointed to tensions related to the Strait of Hormuz and said Iran wants to maintain stability and safe passage for commercial vessels, but it will respond to pressure. Meanwhile, on the same day, Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei delivered a televised message declaring that Iran's Navy was ready to inflict new, bitter defeats on the United States and Israel. The Supreme Leader said, quote, "Just as Iran's drones have delivered lightning-fast blows against the United States and Israel, our naval forces are also ready to inflict new, bitter defeats on the enemy." April 18th marks the founding day of the Iranian army. In the message, Mr. Mojtaba described Iran's armed forces as having courageously defended their territory, their waters, and their flag against military actions. So Iran's supreme leader said there was strong backing from religious faith and from the people. Iran's military had confronted two of the world's leading faithless and arrogant powers, exposing their weakness and failure. Mr. Khamenei said Iran must work to accelerate the development of its armed forces and added that the necessary measures would soon be issued after nearly 2 months since the conflict began. Iran is maintaining a low-cost style of warfare. According to the South China Morning Post on April 19th, Iran's 358 loitering missile, also known as the SA-67 anti-aircraft missile, is attracting attention from international military observers. Because of its cost-effective success in destroying expensive American unmanned aerial vehicles, the 358 missile weighs around 50 kilograms and is equipped with a miniature jet engine and a solid fuel booster rocket. This missile can fly at a speed of Mach 0.6 and has an operational range of 100 to 150 kilometers. The 358 uses an infrared seeker to track its target. The New York Times reported that United States intelligence assessments indicate Iran may still retain access to roughly 70% of its ballistic missile stockpile and around 60% of its missile launchers. In addition, the report quoted American intelligence and military officials as saying Iran has also preserved around 40% of its drone arsenal. When the two-week ceasefire took effect, Tehran still had access to half of its launchers. Since then, Iran has managed to dig out another 100 launchers from underground, raising the total number of operational missile launchers to about 60% of the number it had before the conflict. The report said that along with its launchers, Iran is also trying to excavate any missile stockpiles buried beneath rubble after United States and Israeli airstrikes. Recent American intelligence reports suggest Tehran maintains significant military capability. Some Western officials believe the United States would need to continue strikes for another 2 to 3 weeks in order to fully weaken Iran's military capabilities. Others say that is an optimistic scenario and predict Washington may need much longer, with no guarantee of completely eliminating Iran's industrial and nuclear capabilities. The precautionary steps Iran took before the conflict appear to have helped it limit many losses. In addition to preserving its long-range weapons stockpiles, those plans also helped Iran maintain its leadership structure, despite assassinations by the United States and Israel, targeting senior Iranian political and military leaders. On April 18th, Mr. Trump warned that the United States would resume its airstrike campaign if Iran fails to reach an agreement before April 22nd. President Donald Trump expressed disappointment after Iran closed the waters of Hormuz. Again, he told reporters at the White House, quote, "We are having very good talks. They are playing games a little bit. They want to close the strait once again, just like they have done for many years. They cannot intimidate us," Mr. Trump declared, quote, "We are discussing things with them," and quote, we are maintaining a tough position. On April 17th, Iran announced it was reopening the Strait of Hormuz. After more than 1 month of partial closure since the conflict erupted, President Trump at that time welcomed Iran's decision and said Iran would never close the strait again. However, less than 1 day later, Iran reversed that decision and announced that it was reimposing restrictions on movement through the strait, citing the continued American blockade of Iranian ports. On April 18th, Iran's Supreme National Security Council made clear that Iran would continue controlling the strait. The semi-official Tasnim news agency quoted a statement saying that as long as the American maritime blockade against Iranian ports continues, Tehran will treat it as a violation of the ceasefire and will block the strait. Maritime sources said commercial vessels had received radio messages from the Iranian Navy declaring that the Strait of Hormuz had been closed once again and that no ship would be allowed to pass. The move came as confusion over the status of the waterway deepened, forcing international shipping companies to urgently seek clear verification. Cargo vessels heading toward the waters of Hormuz on April 18th began turning back. While the United States continues its maritime blockade of Iran, ships such as Al-Ghashamiya, which is carrying liquefied natural gas, and Stavanger Eagle, which is carrying crude oil, are now stranded in the Gulf. 3 oil tankers under American sanctions, Guardian, Rain, and Craft, were seen passing through the waters early on April 18th and have now moved into the Gulf of Oman without facing interference. However, the American blockade may still force those ships to turn back. On April 18th, Pope Leo XIV attempted to ease tensions with United States President Donald Trump. According to Reuters, speaking to reporters aboard a flight to Angola during a 10-day visit to Africa, Pope Leo XIV said remarks he made in Cameroon were not aimed at Mr. Trump. The Pope explained that the speech had been prepared 2 weeks earlier, long before the president had made any comments about him or about the peace message he was promoting. Pope Leo XIV said, quote, In fact, everything has been interpreted as if I were trying to argue with the president, which is absolutely not my concern. Last weekend, President Trump called him weak on crime and terrible on foreign policy. Mr. Trump appeared to be reacting to the Pope's growing criticism in recent weeks regarding the war involving the United States, Israel, and Iran. On April 13th, Pope Leo XIV told Reuters that he would continue speaking out. On April 14th, Mr. Trump repeated his criticism once again. Then on April 16th, Pope Leo XIV again condemned world leaders for spending billions of dollars on war and said the world was being destroyed by tyrants. According to Reuters, Pope Leo XIV, the first American pope in the 2,000-year history of the Catholic Church, had maintained a relatively quiet public image during his first 10 months compared with other popes. However, during this African tour, he has shown a stronger speaking style, openly condemning war, inequality, and global leaders. The African trip is described as one of the most complex journeys ever arranged for a pope, including stops in 11 cities and towns across 4 countries, covering nearly 18,000 kilometers by air. On April 18th, the governments of Brazil, Spain, and Mexico pledged to strengthen coordination of aid for Cuba in order to ease the humanitarian crisis that the 3 countries say was caused by the tightening of long-running United States sanctions against the Caribbean island nation. In a joint statement, the leaders said they would expand assistance, while also calling for sincere dialogue consistent with the United Nations Charter and its principles. The 3 sides emphasize that the people of Cuba must be free to decide their own future without outside pressure. The conference was described as an effort to strengthen cooperation among progressive political forces and respond to the rise of far-right movements. Relations between Cuba and many countries in Latin America and Europe have recently improved. As Havana faces severe economic hardship, shortages of fuel, food, and medical supplies, countries attending the meeting said easing sanctions and expanding international cooperation are necessary to improve the lives of the Cuban people. According to Reuters, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Russia would continue supporting Cuba, which is facing fuel shortages, by providing important oil supplies after Moscow recently sent a tanker carrying 700,000 barrels. He also expressed hope that China would join this humanitarian assistance effort. However, he did not say whether the United States would allow future shipments. On the same day, China's foreign ministry also reaffirmed support for Cuba. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Guo Jiakun said during a regular briefing, quote, "China firmly opposes coercive diplomacy and will resolutely support Cuba in defending national sovereignty and resisting outside interference." Amid tensions with the United States, on April 18th, Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel responded to reporters when asked what the country would do if Washington took hostile action. In an interview, he stressed national defense. Mr. Diaz-Canel said clearly, quote, "Cuba is not a nation that calls for war or promotes war, but we are not afraid of war if we are forced to fight in defense of our homelands." Many analysts believe the United States would face a difficult battle if it chose to target the island because Cuba's defense strategy is based on the concept of people's war. The entire population would resist an invasion. President Donald Trump imposed an oil blockade against Cuba in January of 2026 and has repeatedly hinted at a possible regime change campaign against the island located 150 kilometers from Florida. Recently, Mr. Trump said, quote, "We may stop by Cuba after we finish this," an apparent reference to the ongoing war against Iran. Sources said the Pentagon is developing an attack plan, but a political decision is required. Mr. Trump is considered unlikely to be ready to fight on 2 fronts at the same time. Therefore, until the Middle East situation becomes clearer, few expect additional American aggression, and hopes for a diplomatic solution remain. Nevertheless, in March, USA Today also reported on a historic economic agreement that could help avoid military intervention and end the energy blockade against the island. However, the broader context remains highly contradictory. Experts believe Mr. Trump may promise Cuba prosperity and mutually beneficial cooperation, only to threaten annexation a few weeks later. And between those promises, he may declare, "I can liberate the island or control it by force." One notable factor is that United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio is of Cuban heritage. He has strongly opposed the current Cuban government, but has also shown hesitation regarding overthrowing it. Vice President J.D. Vance has also faced suspicion of being sympathetic toward Cuba's leadership because in February he downplayed an incident in which Cuban border guards fired on an American boat. For younger people, the ideals of the previous generation no longer carry the same meaning. Russian military expert Vasily Dandikin said Americans would still face strong resistance. Mr. Dandikin said, quote, "Even if younger people speak differently, Cuba is still Cuba. There are places to hide there, and they have deep experience in guerrilla warfare. Of course, it is not Iran, but a military campaign there would not be easy for the United States." One of the main challenges facing Cuba today is the broad weakening caused by the energy embargo, and the energy needs of an entire country cannot be met through humanitarian aid from a single friendly nation. On April 18th, French President Emmanuel Macron announced that a French soldier serving in the United Nations peacekeeping force in Lebanon had been killed. Mr. Macron said the fallen soldier was Florian Montorio. Mr. Macron added that 3 other soldiers were wounded. He said all evidence indicates Hezbollah was responsible for the attack and demanded that Lebanese authorities immediately arrest those responsible. The United Nations interim force in Lebanon said one of its patrol teams was clearing explosive materials in the village of Gandoria when it came under fire from non-state actors. The force said 2 of the 3 wounded soldiers were seriously injured. Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam condemned the attack and said he had ordered an immediate investigation. The attack took place during a 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, announced by President Donald Trump on April 16th, after Israel and Lebanon held their first direct negotiations in decades. Meanwhile, on April 18th, the Israeli military said it had established a golden line in southern Lebanon, similar to the separation line used in Gaza between areas under Israeli military control. It also said it had attacked individuals approaching that line. According to the Israeli military, the forces identified people nearing the Golden Line in a manner that posed a direct threat and struck suspected individuals. The military added that it remains authorized to act against threats despite the ceasefire. Although the ceasefire took effect on April 16th, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel had not finished its mission. Hezbollah suspended military operations after the ceasefire began, but warned it was ready to act if Israel violated the ceasefire. To support soldiers returning from war zones, President Donald Trump approved an important executive order. Under the order, the United States will expand research into ibogaine with hopes that this special compound could become a key treatment for psychological trauma and severe brain injuries among military veterans. Speaking at the White House, President Trump said he has always believed American patients should have access to breakthrough treatments, especially veterans. He said the order would create opportunities for people suffering severe, the better, symptoms. At present, ibogaine is classified under United States federal law as a Schedule I controlled substance, meaning it is heavily restricted and has not been officially recognized for accepted medical use. The new executive order will remove legal barriers that have previously blocked broad scientific research into the compound. The order also establishes procedures through the Food and Drug Administration to ensure safe medical use. Early studies suggest that ibogaine may help reduce mental health disorders, including addiction and especially post-traumatic stress disorder, often known as PTSD, which many American veterans continue to suffer from. Dr. Mehmet Oz, head of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, said the change marks a comprehensive shift in how the United States approaches compounds in this category. On April 18th, Russian presidential envoy Kirill Dmitriev said the United States' extension of suspended sanctions related to Russian oil affects more than 100 million barrels of crude currently in transit. Writing on Telegram, Mr. Dmitriev said the 30-day extension covering activities involving Russian oil already being shipped would have a significant impact. He said the move comes amid growing criticism of energy sanctions. Mr. Dmitriev also stated that more countries, including the United States, are increasingly recognizing the systemic role of Russian oil and gas in maintaining global economic stability. According to him, Russian energy supplies remain important for balancing markets and limiting price volatility. He also argued that sanctions against Moscow have failed to achieve expected results and have even caused negative sides effects. Mr. Dmitriev said Washington's decision to continue allowing certain transactions involving Russian oil could increase concern within the European Union and the United Kingdom, both of which continue pursuing restrictions. Earlier, the United States Treasury Department decided to extend the temporary suspension of some sanctions on Russian oil cargoes in order to reduce the risk of supply shortages in global energy markets. Under the extended rule, American sanctions will not apply for 30 days to Russian oil cargoes that were loaded onto tankers before the specified deadline. Thomas Graham said the move could be viewed as conciliatory. He said the administration of President Donald Trump understands that continuing sanctions on Russian oil is unlikely to significantly damage Moscow's defense capability. He said it is similar to allowing Russian tankers to dock in Cuba. If the United States believes such measures do not greatly change the broader balance, then there may be little reason to oppose them. Recent data show Russian oil exports continue flowing. According to the International Energy Agency, Russia's oil exports in March rose 4.7%, reaching 7.13 million barrels per day. Ural's crude prices also rose sharply. Some analysts say current sanctions are not enough to significantly disrupt Russian supply and have mainly resulted in changes to shipping routes. At the same time, global oil prices remain influenced by geopolitical factors. Against that backdrop, the American reversal highlights the tension between political goals and the need for market stability. As tools for controlling supply become more limited, flexible policy responses may remain a key factor. Although the United States and Israel say they have sunk many Iranian warships, a smaller naval force known as the Mosquito Fleet is still operating in the shadows. According to the New York Times, the Mosquito Fleet is made up of small, fast, and agile boats and forms the backbone of the naval branch of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Together with missiles and unmanned aerial vehicles launched from shore, these small boats are considered one of the main threats to shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. The boats carry weapons and are often hidden. They can be deployed within minutes and are extremely difficult to detect by satellite. Professor Saeed Golkar said responsibility for maintaining the closure of the strait belongs to the Guard Corps Navy. He explained that the naval branch uses asymmetric tactics in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. Rather than relying on large warships and traditional naval battles, the force uses hit-and-run tactics. Since the conflict erupted in the Middle East, the United Nations Maritime Agency says at least 20 ships have been attacked. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps rarely claims responsibility for such incidents. On April 8th, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Duncan Kling declared that more than 90% of Iran's regular navy, including its major warships, had already been sent to the bottom of the sea. General Kling also estimated that half of the fast attack craft belonging to the naval branch of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps had been destroyed. Even so, the force remains highly disruptive. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps was established after the Iranian Revolution of 1979 because Supreme Leader Ruhollah Khomeini did not trust the regular military. Its naval branch was expanded around 1986. According to Farzan Nadimi, Iran's regular navy during the Iran-Iraq War was reluctant to attack oil tankers belonging to Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. As attacks escalated, the United States deployed warships to escort tankers. Iran responded to American ships with naval mines, damaging the USS Samuel B. Roberts. In a later battle, the United States Navy sank 2 Iranian frigates and several other vessels. 3 years later, Iran witnessed the American victory over Iraq during the Gulf War. Mr. Nadimi said those events convinced Iran that it could not win through direct confrontation with the United States. From that point onward, Iran began building covert forces designed to harass traffic across the Gulf. Today, the naval branch of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is believed to have around 50,000 personnel. It is present on many of the 38 islands controlled by Iran. The force has built at least 10 hardened and carefully concealed bases for attack craft. Farsi base is the center of its special operations. Iran has gradually developed this force over time. It began with modified civilian boats fitted with machine guns. Today it includes purpose-built small craft, mini-submarines, unmanned boats, and even more sophisticated, larger warships. For many years, the Guard Corps Navy has played a cat-and-mouse game with the United States military. During the 1990s and 2000s, small boats often rushed toward American warships before turning away. In 2016, the Guard Corps shocked the American public by seizing 2 United States Navy boats along with 10 sailors. And according to the New York Times, Iran has still not fully employed swarm attack tactics. To counter such tactics, American warships are equipped with heavy guns and advanced defensive weapons. Commercial ships, however, have little ability to defend themselves against attacks of that kind. Although President Donald Trump ordered a blockade on ships departing Iranian ports, American naval vessels continue avoiding direct patrols inside the Strait of Hormuz, where narrow geography limits maneuvering room and leaves little reaction time. Instead, United States ships are more likely operating in the Gulf of Oman or the Arabian Sea. Recently, China's permanent representative to the United Nations, Fu Kong, defended Beijing's decision to veto a draft resolution. He said the move helped prevent further escalation and created conditions for dialogue and a ceasefire. Speaking at a General Assembly meeting, Mr. Fu said China's veto was a responsible choice for peace. He added that the decision stood on the correct side of history. Earlier, the Security Council voted on a draft resolution aimed at guaranteeing maritime safety in the Strait of Hormuz. Although the draft had been revised, China and Russia still used their vetoes, preventing the resolution from passing. According to Mr. Fu, China understands the security concerns of Gulf states. However, he stressed that any Security Council action should aim to reduce tensions rather than create legal cover for unauthorized military operations. The Chinese representative also said Beijing does not support Iranian attacks. At the same time, he reaffirmed that freedom and safety of navigation through international straits must be protected. China called on Iran to take positive steps quickly to restore normal traffic through the strait. Mr. Fu also criticized the United States for increasing military deployments and carrying out what he described as deliberate blockade measures. He said such actions are dangerous and irresponsible. According to China, the security crisis in the Strait of Hormuz is a wider consequence of regional conflict, and only a comprehensive ceasefire can create the foundation for lowering tensions. China also welcomed efforts toward dialogue and a ceasefire, including the launch of talks in Pakistan. Beijing called on all sides to fully respect the ceasefire agreement and pursue political and diplomatic solutions. Mr. Fu said that as a strategic partner and sincere friend of Middle Eastern countries, China will continue playing a constructive role in reducing tensions and promoting long-term peace and stability. As the vital energy transport route through the Strait of Hormuz remains disrupted, a South Korean-flagged oil tanker has for the first time traveled through an alternative route via the Red Sea. On April 18th, South Korea's Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries said a tanker had loaded cargo at Yanbu port on the western Red Sea coast of Saudi Arabia and departed the secure area. As a very large crude carrier, each voyage can transport around 2 million barrels of oil, nearly equal to South Korea's daily oil consumption of approximately 2.8 million barrels. The shipment is part of Saudi Arabia's plan to export around 50 million barrels of oil to South Korea between April and May. South Korea currently imports around 28 million barrels each month. Against that backdrop, the Red Sea is emerging as a strategic alternative to Hormuz. Crude oil from eastern Saudi fields is transported through a pipeline system stretching around 1,200 kilometers to Yanbu port. From there, it travels through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal to reach Asian and European markets. This model reduces dependence on Hormuz, which normally handles around 20% of global oil shipments. However, the Red Sea is not a fully safe option. The region has seen dozens of attacks on ships since 2023, linked to Houthi forces in Yemen. For that reason, the South Korean government had previously advised limiting use of the route because of serious security risks. Even so, pressure to secure supplies has forced Seoul to revise its approach. President Lee Jae-myung earlier said the country cannot abandon shipping routes simply because of risk, while domestic energy demand remains high. Following that direction, plans to use the Red Sea have moved forward. Reopening alternative transport corridors like the Red Sea not only helps South Korea maintain short-term supply stability, but also reflects a broader restructuring of global energy supply chains. In the longer term, this may encourage major importing nations to diversify shipping routes and reduce geopolitical risk concentrated at strategic choke points such as the Strait of Hormuz. Amid growing instability, Dr. Yoel Guzansky said the strategic position of Gulf states has not improved because of the war involving the United States, Israel, and Iran. The conflict appears to be deepening challenges. Despite heavy damage suffered by Iran, Tehran has shown significant resilience while preserving important pressure tools. These include the ability to disrupt shipping through the Strait of Hormuz and attack bypass pipelines. The war has also exposed limits in American security guarantees. According to Dr. Guzansky, the United States has struggled to neutralize this dual threat, whether through direct actions or indirect pressure. From the perspective of Gulf states, the path to a ceasefire was not forcing American conditions on Iran. Instead, it was an effort by Washington to reduce the dual threat through negotiation. Although the war caused serious economic and military damage to Iran, Tehran demonstrated an ability to withstand a coordinated attack by the world's most powerful country, together with Israel. Its new leadership was quickly replaced after initial strikes. Most ballistic missile launch systems remained hidden or camouflaged in underground shelters. Its unmanned aerial vehicle systems also continued operating effectively. It remains unclear what has happened to Iran's uranium stockpiles and centrifuges stored underground. If Iran concludes that it achieved a meaningful level of success, Tehran may feel more immune to future attacks. In addition, the willingness of the United States to engage in another military confrontation with Iran in the future could decline. That may expand Iran's room for maneuver and weaken efforts to contain it. A new public survey shows that support among Americans for the military campaign against Iran remains low, while many voters are skeptical about the goals and planning of President Donald Trump. According to Politico, polling found that only 38% of Americans support military strikes. Notably, around 41% of respondents believe President Trump has no clear plan for resolving the conflict. Only 27% believe the president has a specific strategy. The survey also found that nearly half of voters believe President Trump is spending too much time on international issues instead of domestic priorities. Analysts say the results reflect White House difficulties in persuading the public about its Iran strategy. Responding to criticism, Corey Lewandowski said, the administration is pursuing two goals: managing conflict and advancing economic agenda. He said diplomatic and military efforts are progressing toward an agreement while minimizing disruption to energy markets. However, many experts warn that the wider consequences of war could weaken the economic message. Republican strategist Jason Miller said the war was not properly prepared for and that shifts in administration policy left voters unready for the consequences now being felt. Israel Hayom recently reported that in many respects Israel and the United States have inflicted heavy damage on Tehran, but on another front, Israel faces growing concern: American public opinion. Support for Israel has fallen to its lowest level in nearly 40 years. Since polling began, never before had more Americans viewed the country negatively than positively until this year. Now 48% hold a negative view compared with 46% the positive. Support for Israel has fallen to the lowest level since 1989, while opposition has reached a record high. One moderating factor often cited is that Israel's image tends to decline during wars, but the current decline appears deeper because this conflict has lasted longer. Even more concerning are warning signs from Republicans. According to a CNN survey, a majority of Republicans under 50 now hold negative views of Israel. Support among younger Republicans has dropped sharply compared with 4 years ago. At the same time, sympathy for Palestinians has increased. 37% of Americans now express favorable views of Palestinians, the highest level since polling began in 2000. On April 18th, a gunman opened fire in Kiev, killing at least 5 people and injuring several others. Kiev Mayor Vitaly Klitschko said police attempted to capture the suspect inside a supermarket. President Volodymyr Zelensky said 5 people were confirmed dead after the attacker opened fire and took hostages. 10 people were hospitalized, 4 hostages were rescued. Authorities said the attacker was later shot dead. Some reports suggested the gunman had recently been forcibly mobilized into military service and fled his unit before carrying out the attack. The motive remains unclear. The shooting comes as the war continues. Slovakia's Prime Minister announced that his country has filed a lawsuit at the European Union Court of Justice challenging the bloc's decision to ban Russian gas imports. In May 2026, the European Union approved a plan to phase out Russian pipeline gas by 2027. Prime Minister Robert Fico said Slovakia opposes the use of qualified majority voting. Slovakia says the decision violates core principles underlying European Union treaties. Hungary filed a similar lawsuit earlier this year. Russia and India have also published a new agreement covering procedures for sending troops. The agreement was signed in May 2025 and later ratified by Russia. It sets limits including 5 warships, 10 military aircraft, and 3,000 personnel present at one time. The arrangement also covers logistics, joint exercises, training, humanitarian aid, disaster response, and shared use of airspace and ports. On April 18th, Sergei Lavrov accused the West of pushing Ukraine toward a broader conflict. Speaking at the Antalya Diplomacy Forum, Mr. Lavrov rejected what he described as a growing Western belief that Russia is unable to respond. He cited reports that Ukraine has used NATO airspace for drone strikes. He warned against viewing Russia as a paper tiger. Mr. Lavrov said Russians are patient, but patience does not last forever. He also said Moscow has deliberately avoided defining its red lines clearly. North Korea on April 19th launched at least one unidentified ballistic missile toward the east. The military said it is analyzing the launch and has increased surveillance in case of additional tests. Japan's defense ministry also confirmed the launch and said the projectile landed outside Japan's exclusive economic zone. No damage was reported. Japanese Defense Minister Shinjiro Koizumi said the objects were likely ballistic missiles. The move came less than 2 weeks after North Korea launched multiple missiles on April 8th. Analysts believe the tests are a rejection of reconciliation offers from South Korea. Earlier, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung apologized for an incident involving a drone that crossed into North Korean airspace. He called the act irresponsible and admitted officials were involved. Kim Yo-jong reportedly described the apology as wise, but warned that violations of sovereignty would carry consequences. As of May 2026, the Starlink system continues to be widely used by Ukrainian forces. Russia is estimated to control more than 50,000 Starlink terminals originally produced by SpaceX. Most of them are officially registered through defense channels. Earlier this year, SpaceX in Ukraine introduced a whitelist system. Only verified Ukrainian military terminals can access the network. Unregistered terminals have reportedly been deactivated. Starlink has become a foundation of modern drone warfare and decentralized command systems. It provides stable communications where ground infrastructure has been destroyed. Commanders use it to coordinate artillery, logistics, and drone operations in real time. Many drones and reconnaissance systems rely on Starlink video transmission. Russian forces continue trying to jam the terminals. However, SpaceX has reportedly issued system updates to maintain network stability even under electronic warfare pressure. That concludes today's report. Thank you for watching.